7 global icons, one multi-billion-dollar empire. But what if the very names that built HYBE could also shake its foundation? When economic analysts crunch the numbers, solo ventures, brand deals, independent moves, not every bet looks safe. Which member's artistic ambition flies too far from profit? Whose solo market keeps analysts guessing? And the number one spot? It'll change everything you thought about BTS and money. Let's count down from 7 to 1. Buckle up.
Number 7. Jungkook. And we kick off this list with a name that might genuinely surprise you, because when you hear Jungkook and risky investment in the same sentence, your first instinct is probably to laugh it off, right? I mean, come on. This is the guy who dropped 7 featuring Lotto in July 2023 and absolutely obliterated every chart on planet Earth. We're talking Billboard Hot 100 #1 debut, Spotify single-day streaming records shattered, the kind of commercial performance that makes label executives weep tears of pure joy. So why is Jungkook even on this list? Well, that's exactly what makes this countdown so fascinating, because even the safest-looking investment portfolio has fine print that analysts can't ignore. And Jungkook's fine print? It's more interesting than most people realize. Let's break it down with the kind of detail that economic analysts actually sit with behind closed doors. First, let's establish the empire. Jungkook's solo debut era in 2023 was nothing short of a commercial nuclear explosion. 7 didn't just chart, it dominated. It became the fastest song to reach 1 billion streams on Spotify by a K-pop solo artist. The music video racked up hundreds of millions of views in weeks. Then came 3D with Jack Harlow, another strategic Western collaboration that proved HYBE's playbook of pairing Jungkook with mainstream Western artists was a formula that printed money. And then Standing Next to You, a retro funk pop masterpiece that showed range, artistic maturity, and a performer who could genuinely hold his own on any global stage without the BTS brand attached to his name. His debut album Golden moved over 2 million copies in its first week alone in South Korea, and globally, the numbers were staggering. On paper, Jungkook is HYBE's single most bankable solo asset. Full stop, no debate. The streaming numbers, the album sales, the brand endorsements, Calvin Klein literally saw a measurable spike in global sales after Jungkook became their ambassador. There's even an economic phenomenon that Korean media outlets have dubbed the Jungkook effect, where literally anything he touches, wears, eats, or mentions sees an immediate surge in consumer demand. We're talking about a human being who moved entire product markets just by being photographed holding a bottle of fabric softener. That's not an exaggeration. That actually happened. So where's the risk? Here's where analysts start leaning forward in their chairs. The first layer of risk is what economists call concentration dependency. HYBE, as a publicly traded entertainment company listed on the Korea Exchange, has a significant portion of its revenue model and market valuation tied to BTS as a group. And within that group, Jungkook represents the single highest concentration of solo commercial value. Now, in investment terms, concentration is a double-edged sword. When your biggest asset performs, your stock soars. But when your biggest asset is unavailable, say due to mandatory military service, which Jungkook began in December 2023, the market feels that absence immediately. And it did. HYBE's stock price experienced noticeable fluctuations during the period when all BTS members were serving. Analysts from firms like Mid-IA Asset Securities and NH Investment Securities specifically noted in their reports that the absence of BTS members' solo commercial activities created a measurable gap in projected content revenue for HYBE's fiscal outlook. Jungkook's enlistment, despite being entirely expected and planned for, still represented a risk variable because no other artist in HYBE's roster could replicate his solo commercial output at the same scale. That's a structural vulnerability in HYBE's portfolio, and analysts don't ignore structural vulnerabilities, no matter how golden the asset might be. The second layer of risk is more subtle but equally important. It's about post-military market re-entry. Now, Jungkook completed his service and returned, but here's the thing that analysts watch very carefully.
The entertainment market doesn't pause for anyone. The global pop landscape in 2025 and 2026 is radically different from what it was in 2023. New artists have emerged, streaming algorithms have evolved, consumer attention spans have shifted, and the competitive landscape in both K-pop and Western pop has intensified. The question analysts ask isn't, will Jungkook still be popular? Of course he will. His fan base is one of the most devoted on Earth. The real question is, can Jungkook's solo commercial output match or exceed his 2023 benchmarks in a changed market? Because HYBE stock valuation and investor expectations are partially built on the assumption that Jungkook's solo era will continue to deliver at that elite level. If his next album sells 1.5 million instead of 2 million in the first week, that's still an incredible number by any standard. But to Wall Street and Korean institutional investors, it's a decline, and declines affect stock sentiment.
Number 6. Jimin. Alright, if number 7 already had you raising your eyebrows, number 6 is about to make you sit up straight, because we're talking about Park Jimin, the man who literally made history by becoming the first Korean solo artist ever to debut at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 with Like Crazy in April 2023. Let that sink in for a moment. Not number 10, not number 5, number 1. First week, first Korean solo artist ever. That's the kind of achievement that gets framed in HYBE's corporate headquarters and shown to investors during quarterly earnings presentations. And his debut album, Face, it moved massive units globally, topped iTunes charts in over 100 countries, and established Jimin as a solo force that could absolutely stand on his own 2 feet without the BTS umbrella shielding him from the brutal solo market. Then came 2024 with Muse, his second solo album, and Who became an absolute monster hit that dominated streaming platforms globally, racking up billions of streams and proving that Face wasn't a fluke. Jimin could do it again and again. The Dior Global Ambassadorship, that's not just a brand deal. That's a luxury fashion house putting their entire brand identity partially in the hands of a K-pop idol. And Dior's own financial reports have acknowledged the significant Asian market boost that Jimin's association brought them. We're talking about a man whose face on a Dior campaign drives foot traffic to physical boutiques from Seoul to Paris to New York. So again, same question, why is Jimin on this list at all? And more importantly, why is he ranked above Jungkook in terms of investment risk? Here's where we peel back the curtain and look at what economic analysts actually discuss in their reports, the stuff that doesn't make it into fan translation threads or Twitter trending topics. The first and most significant risk factor analysts identify with Jimin's solo investment profile is what the industry calls the metric duality problem. Let me explain this in plain terms because it's genuinely fascinating. When Like Crazy hit number 1 on the Hot 100, it was a historic moment. Nobody can take that away. But analysts immediately started dissecting how it got there, because the how matters enormously for long-term investment projections. The song's chart performance was significantly driven by massive first-week fan purchasing campaigns, bulk digital buying, streaming parties organized across global fan networks, and strategic timing that concentrated consumption into the tracking week. Now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with this. Every major artist benefits from organized fan support, from Taylor Swift to Drake to anyone you can name. But here's the analytical distinction that matters for HYBE's financial planning. There's a difference between fan-driven peak performance and sustained organic market penetration. Like Crazy debuted at number 1, but it didn't maintain a prolonged presence in the upper regions of the chart in the weeks that followed. Compare this pattern to songs that debut lower but sustain chart presence for months due to organic radio play, playlist algorithmic support, and casual listener discovery. For HYBE's revenue model, sustained performance generates more long-term streaming revenue than a massive spike followed by a steep decline. Analysts from Korean securities firms, including Korea Investment and Securities, have noted in entertainment sector reports that the sustainability curve of solo BTS members' releases is a key variable in projecting HYBE's quarterly content revenue. Jimin's chart pattern, explosive debut followed by a sharper decline, creates a high peak, narrow base revenue shape that's harder to model for consistent financial forecasting. Now, let's talk about the second layer, the Western market positioning paradox. Jimin is without question one of the most recognizable K-pop idols on the planet. His Instagram following is astronomical, his brand recognition cuts across markets. But here's the nuanced risk that analysts track. Jimin's solo musical identity sits in an interesting space between K-pop, R&B, contemporary pop, and experimental sounds that doesn't always align perfectly with Western mainstream radio formatting. Like Crazy had sections in Korean, which, while artistically authentic and culturally significant, creates friction in Western radio programming, which historically remains one of the most important revenue channels and exposure channels for sustained artist presence in the American and European markets. Who, from Views, performed significantly better in terms of streaming longevity, and that gave analysts more optimism. But the question remains, can Jimin consistently crack the Western mainstream not just as a charting phenomenon, but as a radio and playlist staple? Because that distinction determines his solo commercial value is a primary revenue driver for a publicly traded company. Every creative decision carries financial weight. Number 5. Jin. Okay, now we're crossing into territory where the risk conversation gets genuinely complex, because number 5 is Kim Sek-jin, the eldest member of BTS, the man who was the first to walk through those military gates in December 2022, the first to return in June 2024, and arguably the member whose post-military trajectory has given economic analysts the most fascinating puzzle to solve. And here's why Jin is such a unique case study in entertainment investment risk. He is simultaneously one of the most beloved public figures in all of South Korea and one of the hardest solo assets for analysts to build reliable financial projections around. That combination, massive public goodwill paired with commercial unpredictability, is what lands him right here at number 5. Let's rewind and set the stage properly, because Jin's story has layers that most casual observers completely miss. Before enlisting, Jin released The Astronaut in October 2022, a collaboration with Coldplay, one of the biggest rock bands in human history. The song was emotional, cinematic, and deeply personal, essentially a love letter to Army before his military departure. It debuted at number 51 on the Billboard Hot 100, charted across multiple global markets, and the live performance at Coldplay's Buenos Aires concert became one of the most emotionally charged moments in K-pop history. Millions of fans worldwide cried watching it. The cultural impact was undeniable. But here's the analytical lens that investment firms apply to that release. Compared to the chart performance of Jungkook's and Jimin's solo debuts that would follow in 2023, The Astronaut occupied a different commercial tier. It was a pre-enlistment single, not a full solo album rollout with the kind of promotional machinery that HYBE deployed for Golden or Face. So direct comparisons aren't entirely fair, but Wall Street and Korean institutional investors don't really care about fairness. They care about data points. And Jin's solo dataset at the time of his enlistment was limited to one collaborative single and the viral phenomenon of Super Tuna, which, while hilariously iconic, wasn't exactly the kind of commercial release that lets analysts build quarterly revenue models. Then came the return. Jin walked out of military service in June 2024, and the world was watching. His discharge became a global trending event. The Festa reunion moment with all 7 BTS members greeting him was a cultural moment that transcended music. And then came Happy, his first full solo album released in November 2024. Now, Happy is where the investment analysis gets really interesting, because that album was a deliberate artistic statement that told the market exactly who solo Jin intended to be. And who he intended to be was not what the market expected. Happy was warm. It was acoustic-leaning. It was feel-good, sincere, and radically unhurried in an industry that rewards bombastic, trend-chasing, algorithmically optimized pop production. The title track and the album's overall sonic identity leaned into a singer-songwriter aesthetic. Think campfire warmth rather than stadium spectacle. It was, by every artistic measure, authentic to who Jin is as a person. He's talked extensively about wanting to make music that feels genuine, that makes people smile, that doesn't try to be something it's not. And fans loved it. Army embraced the album's gentle energy.
the critical reception was positive. But here's where the analyst conversation diverges from the fan conversation, because HYBE did not generate the kind of explosive first-week commercial metrics that HYBE's other BTS solo releases had established as the benchmark. It sold well, absolutely. By any normal artist standards, the numbers were impressive. But in the specific context of BTS solo releases competing for HYBE's internal resource allocation and investor attention, HYBE occupied a middle tier that raised questions about Jin's solo commercial ceiling. And commercial ceiling is a term analysts use very specifically. It means the maximum revenue potential that an asset can realistically generate under optimal conditions. Every artist has one. The question for HYBE's financial planning is whether Jin's ceiling is high enough to justify the level of investment that a BTS member's solo career inherently demands. Now, the second major risk factor, and this is one that analysts discuss with particular sensitivity, is the age variable. Jin, born in December 1992, is the oldest BTS member. In the K-pop industry, and I want to be very clear that I'm describing market dynamics, not personal value, age has historically been correlated with shifting commercial patterns. The K-pop market, particularly in South Korea, has a well-documented tendency to concentrate peak commercial investment in artists during their 20s, with industry resources increasingly flowing towards younger acts as groups and soloists move into their 30s.
Number 4. J-Hope. Now we're in the deep water. Number 4. And if you've been paying attention to the pattern so far, you know that once we cross into the upper half of this list, the risk factors aren't just footnotes in an analyst report anymore. They're headline discussions in HYBE board meetings. And the member sitting right here at number 4 is Young Hoseok, J-Hope, the man who didn't just step outside the BTS comfort zone for his solo career, he literally set the comfort zone on fire and danced on the ashes. And that, right there, is both the most thrilling and the most financially terrifying thing about J-Hope's solo investment profile. Let me paint the picture with the full context it deserves, because what J-Hope did in 2022 was one of the boldest artistic gambles in modern K-pop history, and the financial implications of that gamble are still being debated by analysts today. July 2022. BTS has just announced their extended hiatus to focus on solo activities. The entire K-pop industry and the global music market is watching to see what each member will do. This is the moment. The first solo album from a BTS member will set the tone, establish market expectations, and signal to investors what solo BTS looks like as a commercial product. And J-Hope steps up first with Jack in the Box. Now, let me tell you what the market expected. The market expected a polished, radio-friendly pop album. Something accessible. Something that would slot neatly into Spotify playlists and Western radio rotations. Something that would reassure HYBE investors that BTS solo projects would deliver the same mass-market commercial appeal as the group's biggest hits. Something safe. What J-Hope delivered instead was a raw, aggressive, genre-defying project rooted in old-school hip-hop, punk energy, grunge aesthetics, and a deliberately abrasive sonic palette that practically dared the mainstream to reject it. More. The pre-release single opened with distorted guitars and aggressive rap delivery that sounded nothing like anything BTS had ever released. Arson, the title track, was a dark, intense exploration of artistic burnout and creative anxiety that was about as far from Dynamite as you could possibly get while still being made by a human being who once performed Dynamite. The album cover was stark. The visual identity was industrial. The entire project screamed, "I am not here to give you what's comfortable." It was artistically brilliant. Critics praised it. Music publications worldwide recognized it as a genuine artistic statement from an idol willing to risk commercial acceptance for creative authenticity. But here's the thing about artistic brilliance in the context of a publicly traded entertainment company. It doesn't automatically translate into the commercial metrics that stock analysts use to build their models. Jack in the Box did not perform at the commercial level that the market had projected for the first BTS solo album. It sold well, certainly well by general standards, but it did not generate the chart-topping, record-breaking, streaming-dominating numbers that the market had priced into HYBE stock based on BTS's group-level commercial performance. The Billboard 200 debut was respectable, but not explosive. The streaming numbers were solid, but not record-setting. And most critically, The album's sonic profile did not generate significant Western radio play, which is one of the primary revenue multipliers that analysts factor into their projections for artists attempting to crack the mainstream Western market. Korean securities analysts noted this gap immediately. Reports from firms including KB Securities and Samsung Securities referenced the performance of BTS solo releases as a variable in their HYBE price targets. And Jack in the Box established a data point that introduced uncertainty into their models. The question wasn't whether J-Hope was talented. Nobody questions that, ever. The question was whether J-Hope's solo artistic identity was commercially aligned with HYBE's revenue optimization strategy. And that question still hangs in the air today. Then came Lollapalooza. And this is where J-Hope's story gets incredibly complex from an investment perspective, because Lollapalooza 2022 was simultaneously one of his greatest triumphs and one of the most difficult data points for analysts to interpret. J-Hope became the first South Korean artist to headline a major American music festival. Let that achievement sink in, the first. He stood on that Lollapalooza main stage in Chicago and delivered a performance that was universally praised as electric, historic, and genre-defining. The cultural significance was immeasurable. The media coverage was massive. The symbolic value for K-pop's legitimacy in the Western live performance market was worth more than any streaming number could capture. But here's the analyst's dilemma. Cultural significance and symbolic value are incredibly hard to quantify in financial models. Number 3. Suga. We are now in the top 3. And if you've made it this far, you already understand that this list isn't about talent. Every member of BTS is extraordinarily talented. That's never been the question. This list is about investment risk, about the gap between what the market can predict and what it can't, about the variables that keep financial analysts staring at their screens at 2 a.m. trying to build models that just won't cooperate. And number 3 is Min Yoongi, Suga, August D. And honestly, the fact that this man operates under 3 different creative identities is already the first clue about why his investment profile is one of the most complex in the entire BTS portfolio. Let me be real with you right now. Suga might be the most respected musician in BTS from a pure artistry standpoint. That's not a slight against any other member. It's an acknowledgement of what Yoongi has built over nearly a decade of relentless creative output. The August D trilogy, August D in 2016, D2 in 2020, and D-Day in 2023, is one of the most ambitious and critically acclaimed solo projects in K-pop history. Not in BTS history. In K-pop history, D-Day wasn't just an album. It was the culmination of a 7-year artistic arc that told the story of a kid from Daegu who was told he'd never make it, who battled poverty, depression, industry rejection, and physical injury, and who emerged as one of the most influential musical voices of his generation. The album debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, the highest charting album by a Korean solo artist at the time of its release. The accompanying world tour, Suga August D Tour D-Day, sold out arenas across Asia, North America, and beyond. The concert film documented performances that were raw, emotionally devastating, and musically immaculate. Yoongi's production skills are so respected that he's produced and written for artists across HYBE's entire roster and beyond. He's a Grammy-nominated producer. He's worked with some of the biggest names in the global music industry. His understanding of sound, composition, and musical storytelling operates at a level that even industry veterans openly admire. On pure musical talent and artistic credibility, Suga is an S-tier asset. So why number 3 on a risk ranking? Buckle up, because this is where multiple risk factors converge into what analysts call a compound risk profile, meaning the risks aren't isolated. They interact with each other and amplify each other in ways that make the overall picture significantly more complex than any single factor alone. The first and most unavoidable risk factor is the one that sent shockwaves through HYBE's investor relations department, the DUI incident. In August 2022, Yoongi was found to have been riding an electric scooter while intoxicated and fell down near his residence. He was subsequently booked by police and tested over the legal blood alcohol limit. His driver's license was revoked. He issued a public apology. HYBE released a statement. And the Korean public, along with the Korean media, Korean advertisers, and Korean institutional investors, reacted. Now, let's be very precise about why this matters in an investment context, because the implications go far beyond a single news cycle. South Korea has an exceptionally low cultural tolerance for DUI-related incidents among public figures. The Korean entertainment industry has seen careers severely damaged or ended entirely by similar incidents. While Yoongi's situation involved an electric scooter rather than a car, and while no one else was injured, the cultural and legal framework in Korea treats any form of intoxicated operation of a vehicle with serious gravity. For HYBE as a publicly traded company, the immediate impact was reputational risk contamination. The possibility that negative public sentiment toward one artist could affect the broader brand perception of BTS and, by extension, HYBE's corporate brand. Korean advertisers are notoriously risk-averse when it comes to endorsement deals involving public figures with any kind of legal incident on their record. Several analysts from Korean brokerage firms noted in their reports following the incident that Suga's solo endorsement deal pipeline could face headwinds, and that any brand deals involving BTS as a group would now need to factor in the reputational variable that the incident introduced. The long-term brand safety risk is not that Yoongi is a bad person. By all accounts, he handled the situation with accountability and contrition. The risk is that in the Korean advertising and corporate partnership market, the incident creates a permanent data point that gets flagged in every brand safety assessment, every endorsement negotiation, and every corporate partnership discussion. It's a variable that never fully disappears from the equation. And in the world of brand valuation and endorsement revenue, which is a massive component of K-pop artist monetization, permanent variables matter. The second major risk factor is health. And this one genuinely concerns analysts who take a long-term view of artist asset valuation. Yoongi has been remarkably open about his health challenges. And while that openness is admirable and has helped destigmatize health struggles for millions of fans, it also puts specific medical information into the public domain that analysts can't ignore. In November 2020, Yoongi underwent surgery to repair a torn labrum in his left shoulder, an injury he'd been managing since before his debut, stemming from a car accident during his trainee days. The surgery required months of recovery and physical therapy, and Yoongi has acknowledged that the shoulder will likely never be 100% what it was. For an artist whose live performance value is a key component of their revenue profile, a chronic physical limitation is a long-term risk variable. Concert tours are among the highest revenue activities for major artists, and any factor that could limit touring capacity, performance intensity, or tour duration directly affects revenue projections. Beyond the shoulder, Yoongi has spoken candidly about his experiences with depression and mental health challenges. Again, his openness about these struggles has been profoundly impactful for public discourse about mental health, particularly in Korea. But from a pure investment risk perspective, mental health variables introduce uncertainty into long-term career continuity projections. Analysts aren't heartless. They understand these are deeply personal matters, but their job is to assess every variable that could affect an asset's long-term revenue generation capacity, and health factors are part of that assessment. The third risk element is genre positioning. Suga's solo musical identity, particularly under the August D moniker, is rooted in hip-hop, rap, and introspective lyricism. His music is dense, layered, emotionally complex, and often dark. It's music that demands active listening. It's music that rewards repeated engagement. It's music that music critics and fellow artists revere. But it's not music that the streaming algorithm gods tend to favor. The global streaming ecosystem, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, is architecturally optimized for music that captures casual listeners within the first 15 seconds, that functions as background listening, that triggers playlist algorithmic amplification through high skip-through rates and repeat plays during passive listening sessions. Suga's music, by design, operates against these mechanics. It's foreground music. It's intentional music. It's music that you sit down and listen to. And while that creates incredible artistic value and deep fan loyalty, it creates a streaming performance profile that's inherently different from pop-oriented releases, which means the revenue per stream projections and long-term catalog streaming value calculations look different for Suga's solo catalog than for members whose music is more algorithm-friendly. The fourth factor is the triple identity complexity. Suga, August D, Min Yoongi the producer. These three identities serve different audiences, different markets, and different revenue streams. Suga is the BTS member, the idol, the group performer, the face that appears in BTS group content and generates group-level revenue. August D is the solo rapper, the raw, unfiltered artist who makes music on his own terms. Min Yoongi the producer is the behind-the-scenes genius who creates music for other artists. From a brand management perspective, maintaining three distinct creative identities is extraordinarily expensive and complex. Each identity needs its own narrative, its own visual language, its own market positioning. And for HYBE's marketing team, the question is always, which identity gets the investment priority? Promoting August D might alienate casual fans who prefer the warmer Suga persona. Promoting Suga the idol might feel inauthentic to the August D audience that values rawness and independence. And Yoongi the producer generates value that often accrues to other artists rather than directly to his own solo revenue stream. This identity fragmentation makes it harder for analysts to build a unified valuation model for Yoongi's solo career, because it's not one solo career, it's effectively three overlapping ones with different audience bases, different revenue patterns, and different growth trajectories. The fifth consideration is the production versus performance value tension. As Yoongi moves deeper into his career, there's a natural gravitational pull toward production, creating music for others, shaping the sound of HYBE's next generation of artists. Number 2. BTS V. We are one step away from the summit. 1. And if the names at number 7 through number 3 already challenged everything you thought you knew about BTS and investment risk, then number 2 is about to flip the entire table over, because we're talking about Kim Taehyung. V, the man who is, by multiple measurable metrics, one of the most popular human beings on the face of this planet. And yet, economic analysts place him at number 2 on the risk ranking for HYBE's future. Let that paradox marinate for a second. How can someone so overwhelmingly popular, so universally adored, so magnetically charismatic that his Instagram posts generate engagement rates that Fortune 500 companies would sell their headquarters for? How can that person be the second most risky investment in BTS's solo portfolio? The answer to that question is one of the most fascinating case studies in the modern entertainment economy, and it reveals a truth that most people don't want to hear. Popularity and commercial predictability are not the same thing. Not even close. Let's start with the numbers that everyone can see. Kim Taehyung's social media following is astronomical. His face is recognized in virtually every country on Earth. He has been named the most handsome man in the world by multiple publications so many times that the title feels permanently engraved next to his name. His association with Celine as a global ambassador transformed the French luxury house's visibility in the Asian market so dramatically that industry analysts at Bain & Company and other luxury consulting firms specifically noted the Taehyung effect in their reports on luxury brand performance in Asia-Pacific markets. When V walks into a room, markets move. When V posts a photo, products sell out. When V appears at an event, it becomes the most discussed moment in global entertainment media for days. His personal brand power is, without exaggeration, among the strongest of any individual entertainer in the world right now. So with all of that firepower, all of that influence, all of that reach, all of that raw magnetic pull, you'd expect his solo music career to be an absolute commercial thermonuclear event, right? You'd expect record-breaking streams, chart-topping singles that stay on the charts for months, album sales that make other solo artists question their life choices. And this is exactly where the risk conversation begins. September 2023. Layover. V's debut solo album. And let me tell you, Layover was a statement. A beautiful, deliberate, unapologetically artistic statement that told the global music market exactly who Kim Taehyung is as a solo artist. And who he is, apparently, is a jazz-loving, R&B crooning, bossa nova whispering old soul trapped in the body of a 21st century global pop icon. Layover was 5 tracks, yes, 5, plus an intro. In an era where K-pop albums routinely pack 10 to 15 tracks to maximize streaming numbers and chart calculations, V released a mini album that clocked in at barely over 20 minutes. The sonic palette was hushed, intimate, drenched in smooth jazz textures, vintage R&B warmth, and the kind of understated vocal delivery that prioritizes emotional atmosphere over vocal acrobatics. Slow Dancing was gorgeous. Rainy Days was atmospheric perfection. Love Me Again was achingly tender. Every single track on that album was a masterpiece of mood and texture. Critics who appreciate artistry praised it. Musicians who understand craft respected it. And the ARMY fanbase, loyal as ever, consumed it voraciously. Layover debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. It sold massively in its first week. On the surface, the numbers looked strong. But here's where analysts pull out their magnifying glasses and start examining the fine print. Because in the investment world, context is everything. Layover debuted at number 2, but its chart longevity was limited. It didn't sustain a prolonged presence in the upper regions of the Billboard 200 in subsequent weeks. The streaming numbers, while impressive in absolute terms, were significantly below what analysts had projected based on V's enormous global popularity. And this is the core of the risk equation, the conversion gap. The conversion gap is the difference between an artist's personal popularity metrics, social media following, brand recognition, public interest, and their ability to convert that popularity into sustained music consumption metrics, streams, album sales over time, radio play, playlist ads. V has one of the largest conversion gaps in the entire global music industry. His popularity suggests he should be competing with the biggest pop stars on earth in terms of streaming numbers. But his musical output, deliberately niche, intentionally atmospheric, consciously anti-algorithmic, doesn't generate the kind of streaming patterns that close that gap. For HYBE, this conversion gap is a significant financial puzzle. They have an artist with arguably the highest personal brand value in their entire roster, but the solo music revenue generated from that brand value doesn't proportionally match. It's like owning the most valuable piece of real estate in the city, but choosing to build a beautiful, small artisan cafe on it instead of a revenue-maximizing skyscraper. The cafe might be wonderful, but the shareholders wanted the skyscraper. The second major risk factor is the acting ambition variable. V appeared in the Korean historical drama, Hwarang, The Poet Warrior Youth back in 2016, and since then, he has repeatedly expressed strong interest in pursuing acting as a significant component of his career. He's talked about it in interviews. He's shown genuine passion for the craft. His natural charisma, his emotional expressiveness, his visual presence. All of these qualities suggest he could be an excellent actor. But here's the investment tension that keeps HYBE's strategic planners up at night. If V seriously pursues acting, his time, energy, and creative focus get redirected away from music, which is HYBE's core revenue engine. Acting generates revenue, absolutely. But it generates revenue on a completely different timeline, through completely different channels, with completely different margins than music. A K-drama role takes months of exclusive commitment. A film role can take even longer. During that time, the artist isn't recording albums, isn't touring, isn't generating the streaming and concert revenue that HYBE's financial model is built around. And the revenue from acting goes through drama production companies and broadcasting networks, with HYBE taking a management cut rather than owning the full revenue stream the way they do with music releases on their own labels. If V becomes a serious actor, and he has the talent and the desire to do exactly that, HYBE could find itself in a position where their most personally popular artist is generating his most significant creative output through a channel that HYBE doesn't fully control and doesn't fully monetize. That's a structural risk that affects long-term revenue planning in a very real way. The third risk element is creative unpredictability, and I mean this as a genuine analytical observation, not a criticism. Kim Taehyung is, perhaps more than any other BTS member, a creative spirit who operates on his own internal wavelength. His artistic interests span jazz, classical music, photography, visual art, fashion, wine culture, vintage aesthetics, and a deeply personal sense of beauty that doesn't conform to market trends. He doesn't chase what's popular. He gravitates toward what moves him. After Layover, he released FRI, Yendi S, a single that leaned more toward pop accessibility but still carried that distinctly Taehyung atmospheric quality. Then came Winter Ahead, a duet with Park Hye-shin, a Korean ballad legend, which was a stunning artistic choice that signaled deep respect for Korean musical tradition but was, by design, a niche release targeting the Korean ballad market rather than the global pop market. Each release demonstrates artistic integrity and personal taste. But from an investment forecasting perspective, this unpredictability makes it nearly impossible for analysts to build reliable projections for V's solo revenue trajectory. With some artists, you can look at their track record and make reasonable assumptions about what their next release will sound like, who it will target, and how it will perform commercially. With V, every release is a genuine mystery. Will the next project be jazz, R&B, a pop pivot, a Korean ballad collection, an avant-garde experimental project, a film soundtrack? Nobody knows. And in the language of financial analysis, nobody knows translates directly to elevated risk premium. The fourth factor is the luxury brand positioning paradox. V's personal brand is firmly positioned in the luxury space. Celine, high fashion, wine appreciation, art collecting, a curated aesthetic that screams refined taste and exclusivity. This positioning is incredibly valuable for luxury brand partnerships, and the Celine ambassadorship is proof of that. But luxury positioning and mass-market music consumption exist in tension with each other. Luxury brands thrive on exclusivity, the feeling that not everyone can access the product. Mass-market music consumption thrives on ubiquity. The goal is to be everywhere, on every playlist, in every market, accessible to every listener. V's personal brand says exclusive. Mass market. Number 1. RM. This is it. The Summit. The name that sits at the very top of this list. And if you've been on this journey from number 7 all the way here, you've watched the risk factors escalate from manageable market variables to structural investment concerns to existential strategic questions. And now, at number 1, we arrive at the name that doesn't just carry the highest investment risk for HYBE's future. He carries a kind of risk that transcends spreadsheets, quarterly earnings, and stock price targets. Because number 1 is Kim Namjoon, RM, the leader of BTS, the man who built the philosophical, intellectual, and artistic foundation upon which the entire BTS phenomenon was constructed, and the man whose solo career trajectory, personal convictions, and evolving relationship with the very concept of being an idol represents the single most complex, most unpredictable, and most potentially disruptive variable in HYBE's entire investment portfolio. Let me be absolutely clear about the weight of what I'm about to say. Placing RM at number 1 on this list is not a criticism. It is, in many ways, the highest form of recognition. Because the risks associated with RM aren't the risks of weakness. They're the risks of extraordinary strength, a mind so powerful, a vision so independent, and a sense of artistic integrity so uncompromising that the traditional entertainment industry framework struggles to contain it. And when your most important artist might be outgrowing the framework your entire company is built on, that's the kind of risk that keeps CEOs awake at night. Let's build this from the ground up, with every layer of context and detail it deserves. December 2022. Indigo, RM's first official solo album, and the moment the global music market got its clearest look at who Kim Namjoon truly is when he's not operating within the BTS collective framework. And what they saw was not what they expected. Indigo was not a K-pop album. Let me say that again with emphasis. Indigo was not a K-pop album. It was a deeply personal, genre-fluid, art house musical project that drew from neo-soul, classic hip-hop, alternative rock, folk-tinged balladry, and spoken-word poetry. The collaborator list alone told you everything about Namjoon's artistic ambitions. Erykah Badu, Anderson .Paak, Tableau, Eugene from Cherry Filter, Paul Blanco, Mahalia. These weren't commercial features designed to game the algorithm. These were artistic partnerships chosen because Namjoon admired their craft, resonated with their artistry, and wanted to create something that existed at the intersection of their creative worlds. Wildflower, featuring Eugene, the title track, was a mid-tempo reflection on fame, identity, and the desire to burn quietly like a wildflower rather than explode like fireworks. It was poetic. It was philosophical. It was breathtakingly beautiful. And it was absolutely, categorically, deliberately not designed to be a pop hit. Indigo debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200, which is objectively an incredible achievement. But context matters. This was the leader of BTS, the most successful musical act in K-pop history, releasing his debut solo album with the full machinery of HYBE behind him. Industry analysts had projected potential number 1 debut based on BTS's group-level commercial precedent. Number 3 was strong, but it was below the market's embedded expectations. And in the stock market, performance below expectation matters more than absolute performance. HYBE's stock didn't crash, but the data point was noted, filed, and incorporated into revised projections. Then came May 2024. Right place, wrong person. RM's second solo album. And if Indigo was a gentle declaration of artistic independence, RPWP was a full-blown manifesto. This album went even further from commercial convention than its predecessor. The sonic landscape was drenched in indie rock textures, alternative production, shoegaze-adjacent atmospherics, and a vocal approach that prioritized raw emotional delivery over polished pop perfection. Come Back to Me, the lead single, accompanied by a short film directed by Lee Sung-jin, was indie cinema meets indie rock meets philosophical meditation on loss and longing. Lost had punk energy. Groin was experimental to the point of being genuinely avant-garde by K-pop standards. The album as a whole sounded like it could have been released by a respected indie artist on a boutique label, not by the leader of the world's biggest pop group on the world's biggest K-pop entertainment corporation. Critically, RPWP was praised. Music journalists who cover indie and alternative music, publications that normally wouldn't touch K-pop with a 10-foot pole, gave it serious, respectful reviews. Namjoon was being recognized as a legitimate artist in spaces that had never taken K-pop seriously. That's a cultural achievement of enormous significance. But commercially, RPWP debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200, lower than Indigo, and its streaming performance, while solid in absolute terms, reflected a pattern that analysts had begun to identify clearly. RM's solo music appeals deeply to a core audience that values artistry, intellectualism, and emotional depth, but it doesn't expand significantly into the broader casual listener market that drives the volume metrics upon which HYBE's revenue model depends. This is the conversion problem on steroids, and it sits at the heart of why RM is number 1 on this list. Here's the first major risk factor, stated plainly. RM's solo musical identity is the most commercially divergent from BTS's group identity of any member, by a wide margin. When the market invests in HYBE based on BTS's brand, it's investing in the expectation of pop-level commercial output, the dynamite and butter and boy with love energy that generates billions of streams, dominates radio, and drives massive merchandise and licensing revenue. RM's solo work actively moves in the opposite direction. Each successive release gets more artistic, more niche, more intentionally distanced from mainstream pop convention. For analysts building models, this trajectory creates a forecasting problem that compounds over time. If each RM release performs incrementally lower on commercial metrics, while moving incrementally further from pop accessibility, the projected revenue curve points in a direction that doesn't support the investment thesis. Now, the second risk factor, and this is the one that makes RM genuinely unique on this list, is the ideological dimension. Kim Namjoon is not just an artist who makes unconventional music. He is a thinker who has publicly, repeatedly, and with increasing clarity, questioned the fundamental structures of the idol industry itself. In interviews, in his music, in his social media presence, in his art exhibition visits, in his book recommendations, in his UN speeches, Namjoon has consistently articulated a worldview that places artistic integrity, personal authenticity, and intellectual freedom above commercial obligation. He's spoken about the tension of being an idol, a manufactured product, versus being an artist, an autonomous creative being. He's talked about the exhaustion of performing a version of himself that the market demands rather than expressing who he truly is. He's reflected on the commodification of human beings in the entertainment industry. These aren't casual observations. These are deeply held convictions from the leader of HYBE's most valuable asset. And here's why this is a risk factor that analysts classify differently from anything else on this list. If RM's evolving convictions about artistic autonomy and industry reform begin to influence BTS's collective approach to their relationship with HYBE, the implications aren't just about one member's solo career. They're about the entire BTS-HYBE dynamic. RM is the leader. He is the member the others look to for direction, for philosophical grounding, for the articulation of what BTS stands for. If the leader's vision evolves toward greater artistic independence, greater creative control, and potentially greater structural separation from HYBE's corporate framework, that vision has the gravitational pull to influence the entire group's trajectory. This is what analysts call systemic risk that doesn't stay isolated in one asset, but has the potential to cascade across the entire portfolio. No other BTS member carries this kind of systemic influence, which is precisely why RM sits at number 1. The third risk factor is the contract and negotiation variable. In 2024, all 7 BTS members renewed their contracts with HYBE, but the terms of that renewal and the long-term structural relationship between BTS and HYBE remain subjects of intense market speculation. Namjoon, with his intellectual depth, his understanding of the global entertainment industry, and his clearly articulated views about artist autonomy, is widely considered to be the member most likely to advocate for terms that maximize artist independence and creative control. In any negotiation between a dominant artist group and their management company, the shift of power toward the artist side reduces the company's ability to direct, control, and commercially optimize the artist's output. For HYBE shareholders, any reduction in HYBE's strategic control over BTS.
And there it is, the full countdown. 7 members, 7 investment profiles, 7 stories of brilliance colliding with the cold, unforgiving mathematics of the global entertainment market. From Jungkook at number 7, the golden standard whose commercial dominance still carries the weight of impossible expectations, to Jimin at number 6, the chart-making phenomenon navigating the tension between explosive debut peaks and long-term market sustainability, to Jin at number 5, the beloved wildcard whose next chapter remains an open book that even the sharpest analysts can't read, to J-Hope at number 4, the fearless trailblazer who chose artistic revolution over commercial safety and dared the market to keep up, to Suga at number 3, the genius producer whose compound risk profile is the inevitable shadow cast by a career that refuses to be anything less than brutally honest, to V at number 2, the most magnetically popular man on Earth whose creative soul operates on a frequency the commercial playbook was never designed to capture. And finally, to RM at number 1, the visionary leader whose intellectual and artistic evolution poses questions so profound that they reach beyond spreadsheets and stock prices into the very identity of what HYBE is and what it aspires to become. But here's what every analyst report, every securities brief, every quarterly earnings projection fundamentally misses about BTS. And this is the truth that no financial model can ever fully capture. These 7 men were never designed to be safe investments. They were never meant to fit neatly into revenue forecasting templates. They were never supposed to be predictable, optimizable, algorithmically manageable assets on a corporate balance sheet. BTS became the biggest musical act in the world because they took risks that the market said were impossible. They sang in Korean when the market said only English sells globally. They talked about mental health when the industry said idols should only smile. They wrote their own music when the system said idols should just perform what they're given. They built Army not through corporate marketing strategy, but through raw, unfiltered human connection that no MBA program teaches you how to manufacture. Every single risk factor on this list, the artistic independence, the genre experimentation, the creative unpredictability, the intellectual evolution, the refusal to be boxed into commercial formulas, these aren't bugs in the BTS investment thesis. They are the thesis. They're the exact qualities that built a fan base of millions who don't just consume content, but genuinely care. And in the entertainment economy, genuine emotional investment from an audience is the most valuable and the most impossible to replicate asset that exists. So yes, economic analysts are right to identify these risk variables. That's their job.
The numbers are real. The market dynamics are real. The tensions between art and commerce, between personal evolution and corporate strategy, between creative freedom and shareholder expectations. All of these are real, measurable, and consequential for HYBE's financial future. But here's what the numbers will never tell you. BTS has defied every projection, shattered every ceiling, and rewritten every rule that the music industry thought was permanent. They did it as 7. They did it by being exactly who they are. And if history has taught us anything about these 7 men, it's that betting against their ability to turn risk into revolution is the riskiest investment of all. To Army watching this, you already knew. You've always known. The world is just now catching up to what you saw from the beginning, that the most valuable thing about BTS was never their commercial output. It was their truth. And truth in every market that has ever existed eventually wins. This has been the ranking of BTS members with the most risky investments for HYBE's future. 7 names, 7 risks, 1 undeniable legacy, and a future that no analyst on Earth can predict. Because BTS has never, not once, followed anyone's script but their own.